Good evening. Thank you for MC to do the job of introduction. I had a lot of things written about all of you. She, I think, covered most of it. So that saves some time, but I see it is also the last session and relatively an empty sort of hall. So that tells me that we can kind of make it as inclusive as possible with audience, right? Because there are only very few. Um, to start with, the importance of this topic, financial inclusion has been, at the forefront of everything government does, regulator does, and every players in financial services. They do it as a matter of strategy and as also sometimes as a matter of compulsion, because without getting everyone included, it is a challenge. So the one interesting part is, apart from the PSL or similar overarching framework, now as a consultant, what I see in the industry is there is a newly found focus on Bharat as a segment, as a very highly profitable, fast-growing segment also. So it is in that context, with the fintech evolution that India has seen, we are one of the largest, we are the largest payment ecosystem in the world, and we are one of the largest fintech ecosystem in the world. So there's a lot of success stories. So it is in that backdrop, I think today we will examine this topic in terms of the evolution, growth, and impact of fintechs and the imperative of financial inclusion for India to perhaps reach the Viksit Bharat vision. So in that backdrop, let me first allow my panel to sort of set their expectations and say a few words about where you come from, what's your background, etc. Starting with you, Sugandh.
Thank you, and thank you to Financial Express for organizing this and inviting us. My name is Sugandh, and I'm the CEO of an organization called Fintech Association for Consumer Empowerment, abbreviated as FACE. It's an industry body convening fintechs and also RBI recognized SRO, which is first and perhaps the very unique experience which India is doing. So as an association, we stand for, as our name says, we convene fintechs to bring together customer empowerment. Digital financial inclusion is our core, so all our members provide different kind of financial services in a digital format, be it credit, payments, more often, and of course, some of bit of insurance and others. And we also cater to a lot of fintech companies which partner with regulated entities and provide financial services. Between our members, 80% of the credit which flows to low-income and mid-income segment is through our members. And of course, we work as an SRO, work very closely with RBI and government to ensure that digital financial services are safe, transparent, and customer-centric. So that is what our mandate is. And as explained earlier in my profile, I've worked very closely in the financial inclusion space for more than 15 years now. First in the microfinance, which is very physical-oriented way of delivering financial services, to fintech, which is completely digital. So it has been a fascinating journey. And I look forward to this discussion where we'll be talking both spectrum in some sense and how to bridge the gap between the two. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sugandh.
Yeah. Firstly, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. And as you mentioned, hopefully we'll have a very interactive audience. So I'm Souparno. I represent a fintech called BalanceHero. We are into payments and lending. So on one side, we have the payments business as a PPI license holder. So we have our interoperable wallet. On the other side, we are into lending, primarily into unsecured lending only. And we do it through our own books, which is our own NBFC. We have a middle layer NBFC, and we also do through partnership, which is like your co-lending and FLDG. So for us, the last mile is very important, and again, pertinent to our conversation, possibly would be able to share certain insights firsthand, how all of us and the ecosystem is highly indexed towards Bharat, what kind of data penetration, what kind of consumer penetration, and possibly trying to burst some of the myths as well. So that would be my attempt, but happy to take questions. Otherwise, overall have been in the financial services industry for the last 24 years, but last 4 years in the startup space. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good evening. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to say thank you for having me. And if it's about inclusion, I guess we are the only non-profits in the room. So thank you for having us. I represent Nasscom Foundation. I have worked in the nonprofit space for 25 years. So inclusion, equity, working with women, all those social aspects are something that we do. But in the foundation, our primary philosophy is tech for good, which is using technology for social good. It is exactly to bridge the digital divide that we have in India between the urban and the rural poor. And as Nasscom Foundation, we truly believe that technology can be an equalizer. It can actually really work towards, building the element of inclusion and societal progress. So there's great transformative power that we believe exists in technology today. So our mission is to really use that and harness that for the marginalized in the country. So Nasscom Foundation is works pan-India. We also work through implementing partners, but we also have direct implementation. And we work in a range of, across things like digital literacy, digital financial literacy. We work in employability. We specifically also focus programs on women entrepreneurs. And we work with people with disability. And we have a very niche program which focuses on social innovation and social change. So there's a lot of range of things that we do here, but I'm particularly excited to be here to talk about fintech today.
Thank you, Seema. We'll start with you, Sugandh. Sitting at a SRO place, you have a sort of aerial view of everything that happens in the fintech industry. You also interface a lot with regulators and on the other side with the government and on funding agencies. A lot of them look up and you have regular conversations. How do you see this space is positioned today? The fintech as a sector is positioned today. What are they doing from the inclusion perspective? And how do you see this evolving over the next few years?
So I think if you see at a very high level from the policy perspective, fintechs is very central to the government agenda, whether it's about inclusion, whether it's about financial inclusion, or generally about economic opportunities. So I think if you go across government regulators, you always talk about fintechs all the time. I think in some sense, you get more than fair share of attention in terms of what fintechs can do. And no wonder, right? Because ultimately the kind of scale that we have in our country, the kind of diversity we have in the country, and very large population of low and mid-income population, except for the so-called 100 million or 150 million. If you remove them, if you have to really cater to these people, the only way you can use is use of digital technology. So I think on that front, there is a very strong alignment across regulator, across government authorities, that it has to happen through digital. So there's no two-way about it. So that is very clear. In fact, if you see the last budget, they talked about that we don't just talk about financial inclusion, but digital financial inclusion is the theme, right? So the whole idea is that eventually everybody has to move, and that is the only way you can reach the customer. So I think from that perspective, it's very clear. Second thing which we hear a lot is strong focus on the underserved segment, right? So digital financial inclusion, not for itself, unless it really helps consumer to have a better life. So I think as industry and as everybody who is a stakeholder, we all recognize that we are dealing with a very vulnerable customer base for most part, in some ways. Because ultimately, fintechs cater to a segment which is otherwise not served, right? This is their niche, this is their playground. And therefore, how do you really design digital financial services in a way which helps them? So that again is something which we never lose sight of, because you would only be successful if you're providing products which are suitable to this segment. So again, we see strong focus for things like we keep getting challenged from regulators and others that do something for women. Women particularly are very excluded generally in the financial inclusion, and also more so in the digital financial services. What about elderly people, which obviously as India progresses, you will see more in people in that segment. And if you suddenly move everything to digital, how do they get served? And of course, a lot of people who are, not very well aware of digital ecosystem, English, for example, in which a lot of apps operate and so on. So, there's a lot of dimensions to it, but I think and therefore we also carry a lot of responsibility and expectation, because if India has to really, become what we aspire it to become, fintechs would have very important role, not just in providing digital financial services, but the integration which it has with the adjacent sector, right? Whether it's e-commerce, whether it's, otherwise digital economy, fintechs would be that lever or that liquid which will facilitate that. So from that standpoint, it's very, very critical.
It's actually playing a bit of catalyst and anchoring the wheel sort of play. And I think it is also the friend in many places. Your remarks about the language or the literacy on the digital side, and whether it is now, you mentioned that divide is kind of being addressed to a large extent by fintech, but there is also this view in terms of you rightly articulated in terms of, can everyone access, can everyone understand, are they prepared enough, etc. So from that point of view, Souparno, the question to you is, from an affordability, accessibility, and experience standpoint, as the industry now have solved everything, or are we getting there? What is the directional clarity we can offer to the audience?
I think there are two aspects to it, right? For sure, the industry has come out of the stage of nascency, in the sense like the thesis, the hypothesis around like what could be your potential opportunity area, what could be the opportunity in terms of technological applicability, right? There is one thing which is there on thesis, and the other aspect is gaining a validation out of it. So for sure, overall as an industry, I would like to believe as fintech, we have come out of the stage of nascency. But having said that, we are still scratching the surface. It's a huge market which is out there. See, the fact of life is we are blessed to be in a country like India. You look around the world, everything in business starts with demand, if I may say, right? So the demand itself in most part of the world is like you have to create demand. Yeah. Whereas here we are fortunate that we have to by and large capture the demand. Yeah. To the point which Sugandh was mentioning, right? So if you double click on the D of demand, I would like to believe there are 3 Ds. First is like the developmental factor. You will see the reflection of it even in fintechs, be it be on lending, be it be on wealth tech solutions. There is an aspect of developmental factor and the per capita GDP across the country. Second aspect is of that of the demography. Like as we say, right, if you have to kind of really see the tech for tomorrow, see how the young generation is actually using technology, right? So that aspect is there. Demography is still favorable for us. And the most important aspect as we speak in terms of actually capturing and creating categories is digital. Now in digital, what fintechs are doing, again to keep it simple, to the point which you're mentioning, our thesis is very clear. You talk to any of the fintechs, it's by and large 3 A's. Are you making it affordable? In the sense like the cost of service is going to that stage to the consumer so that the service is reaching and getting democratized. Today, even in lending, if you are able to make a profitable STPL business, the fact of life is there is a lot of democratization and cost disintegration which has happened thanks to technology. So that's affordability. Second is, are you able to make it accessible? All said and done, brick and mortar and even phygital models has its own limitations in terms of scalability. I'll give you our own example. We are like in our business, like 87% comes from tier 2 and tier 2 plus. That means only 12% is tier 1, which is the top 8 cities of India. So you're actually living the top 8 cities, and the 87% business for, in our case also, is coming from tier 2 and tier 2 plus. And if you think fintech as a whole, obviously there are variances. So for example, wealth tech has a different footprint, but overall if you see the tier 2 plus reachability, accessibility, the fact that we are able to serve 97% of the pin codes. So we talk about pin codes, right? We don't talk about, okay, where you have a branch or where you have an outlet or whether your correspondence has to have reachability to that remote area. We don't talk on those lines because everything is on the app. So that's the aspect of accessibility. And the third is availability. The point which Sugandh, you were also mentioning, that what kind of products and services are we able to make it available on the fingertip of the customer? And it is not just about servicing, it's also about discovery. Think of it, today tier 1, tier 2, or even beyond, if you have to take a loan or if you have to take a policy, you actually go to many of the aggregator websites. So that's also fintech, right? So from discovery to final servicing, the entire life cycle is getting catered to. So to the question, therefore, what you had, right? This is how the serviceability horizon is getting pushed. This is how the demand is getting captured. And just to keep the simplicity of like cost, availability, and accessibility.
Yeah, it makes sense. In fact, that brings us to a very interesting point. Sugandh mentioned about how diverse is the sort of customer segment that we are operating to. And you mentioned about how fintechs are already there in terms of being able to serve. So we do have a market reality and we do have regulator, government support, so enablers are there. We do have products and propositions, but the adoption is key. And that's where, Seema, I would come to you for perhaps in your role from the Nasscom Foundation. I understand you do a lot of work in this area of adoption and helping people come up the curve, and true to our topic today, margins to mainstream, that is a big part of bringing people to the mainstream. So can you share some insights and maybe perhaps share some example of how your activities have helped on this count, and particularly from a woman entrepreneur sort of background?
So yeah, if I have to narrow this down, I would like to say that I would take on some of the things that my fellow panelists have rightfully said. And if I give a reference to the recent union budget, we want to say the kind of potential we have when we talk about rural India. So rural regions actually contribute close to 20% to India's GDP and actually draw a little more than 42% of the workforce. So, there's a great, range that we are talking about. So, as far as Nasscom Foundation is concerned, if I have to give you an example about, the numbers or the outreach that we have, like I said, we are particularly focused on working with the marginalized section of society. So one example is that we work with both the government and private players. And one particular example that we work with Niti Aayog, and we have been working with Niti Aayog for some time now, and we are covering their aspirational block program where 60 blocks are covered. And in that particular program, we are going beyond the lower than tier 2, tier 3 cities. We are talking about really working in the most remote parts of the country, where we are actually working with a section of people that are known as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So, you cannot get more remote than that. And in these areas, we are working on the premise that the initiative that we have is actually to bridge that digital divide, where we enhance this community's, digital literacy. We establish e-governance centers, and we actually promote them in such a way that they actually access financial tools. And actually the last mile in this is really to say that we want to equip these vulnerable groups in such a way that they can access the government services. And you will see there's plenty that the government is, kind of categorizing in terms of easy loans or, e-banking, and even what they call is Jan Dhan Yojanas. And basically the idea is that then these sections of society can access these government schemes, use these financial tools, use healthcare systems, and at the end of the day, the idea is to make them active participants to India's digital economy, and we're talking about trillion, right? So that's some of the things we do. If I have to make it even more narrow, and if I have to give an example, when you say, how do we really work with women? So women make a center focus of a lot of our programs. So we work with women, we work with people with disabilities, we work with marginalized groups, and we have an entire program that works with women entrepreneurs. And this is in the rural areas, whether they are artisans or in the space of agriculture. We also work with women in tech. So women who are already in technology, but then somewhere they really need to be reskilled to move up in the ladder, and they don't stay stagnant. But if I come back to the marginalized section, I would say, give you one example. That, I'm sure a lot of you, when you were young, you would have played with wooden toys. And they are handcrafted, wooden, eco-friendly toys called Chinnapatna toys. It comes from a part of Karnataka. And over there, we are working with 200 such women where we have, in our program, we have helped them, use the digital financial, training, digital literacy, given them access to banking accounts, and not just that, but the core, what you call the core banking system solutions. And we have one particular woman, for example, who's 32 years old, who happened to lose her husband in the pandemic and became a sole bread earner of her family. And she decided to get associated with our program because she really wanted to build her financial independence. And there was a time she was struggling to make even 100 or 200 rupees a day. But going through our training, digital awareness, then there's a lot of mentoring and hand-holding that goes on. She was able to really use her, her products and put them online to really access the online marketing, online payment, access easy government loans. And today, as we speak, she proudly claims that she's taking home more than 10,000 rupees a month. I think that's significant. Yeah. So I'm saying that, when you talk about the last mile, taking fintech to the last mile, I don't think you can go more last mile than going to those aspirational blocks that Niti Aayog works with, or these kind of women who really, have also challenges with their basic literacy, may not have even gone through formal schooling. Yeah. And they're able to really use this to enhance their own livelihoods. And we always know in the space of education, we say, you educate one woman, you educate an entire generation. Right. And here we are saying that we are building the livelihoods and earning capacity of women using fintech. So you can imagine what kind of transformation takes place in her immediate family and community.
Absolutely. I mean, that's some impact, right? And it's good to hear stories like this. There are plenty of them. A lot of our fintechs, institutions that work in the inclusion space, livelihood space, there are millions of people who've lifted out of poverty and struggle over the last 7-8 years because of the digital public infrastructure, facilitating them access and helping them narrow the divide. The interesting thing about tech is it moves faster than our thoughts, right? It just suddenly become obsolete and suddenly new things come in. So this is the time everyone is trying to figure out, what do I do with AI? What do I do with ML? And then Gen AI, conversational AI, a lot of buzzwords and a lot of things that we get to hear and sometimes wonder about how much of this is real and how much of this is actually going to hit us. So Sugandh, my question to you is, I have a view on this which I'll share after I hear from all of you. I would like all of you to reflect on this in terms of how much is this fast forwarding tech adoption and tech, if I were to say proliferation in the fintech industry, is helping from a consumer standpoint, from a point of view of fast adoption or doing doing 2x, 3x of what they could otherwise achieve. Can you please?
Yeah. I think very positive so far, right? So, and there are many use cases. I think Souparno is an expert. He can talk about it. He was teaching me before that. But generally, think about the biggest hurdle fintechs face, right? When we talk about languages, which India has, and people not being able to, interact with in their own common language, while one can navigate the app. When there's any problem or they want to understand the product deeper, maybe they would like to talk to a person in the language they would prefer, and this could be very costly affair. So use of these kind of technologies is really helping people to reach out to much more wider customer base in the way they prefer, and very the buzzword is, I would say, customization. So really, not just in terms of how you engage with the customer, how you talk about your products, how you offer customized solutions. So I think that is a very big piece where a lot of adoption is happening on the customer service and customer sourcing side, where you are using technologies to engage with them effectively. Second thing which we see a lot from our members is really the fraud prevention bit, where again you see new patterns emerging and they are changing very fast, and new MOs appearing every day almost. So in that situation, the static models may not work, and therefore ability to use AI ML in some sense to look at these patterns. And the scale is huge for fintechs. Just to give a sense of, you are seeing in the payment, even if you see lending side, the amount of applications which each fintechs would be processing every second, every minute is huge. So there's no way one can really, understand what is going on without using technology. So that is another use case where we are seeing the deployment. Third thing which I think is also happening is even the RegTech solution, the compliances, right? We know the expectation, how it is, increasing, whether it's respect to KYC or providing different kind of, protection to the customer and, contracts and so on. So again, there itself also we are seeing use cases when people are able to look at lot of regulation which apply, right? From a corporate standpoint, not just regulatory guidelines, but there are so many other regulation which one has to follow, and therefore the use of these models to ensure that, what you are doing is compliant and so on is happening. So these, I would say, but from a customer point, I think there's a lot of use cases, positive impact
on this. So, Varna, your views from both perspectives, from customer as well as from the provider, service provider perspective, how are these tech impacting today? And can you share something specific that can perhaps help the audience relate to also? It will be helpful.
Yeah, no, sure. Tech is our DNA, right? For us, everything is tech first and tech only. And it's not just a buzzword, like that's what we do. But having said that, there is no FOMO. There is no FOMO on AI, Gen AI, ML. It's okay. You take it easy, have a patient understanding of what you want to do it responsibly. I'm a hardcore technologist. I can sincerely make that commentary as an opening statement itself. So there is no fear of missing out. We have enough to do, enough to cater to the customers if we do it right. Now, coming to some of the examples which you asked for, I'll start off with lending. In lending, what fintechs are able to do is actually going by the theme, right? For us, alternate is mainstream. When you talk about a different kind of a product and asset class, let's say a house loan or a home, let's say a four-wheeler loan, it's still at a binary space in the sense like you have a credit score, you have certain aspects, and then you are good to do underwriting. And you have a collateralization also. When it comes to a different kind of an product and asset class, you're talking about unsecured, you're talking about like smaller ticket loans. So there, not only the aspect of a bureau score and the traditional way, that becomes the lowest common denominator. That becomes, if I may say, the hygiene. On top of it, you're actually able to process zillions of data.
Yeah.
And zillions of alternate data. And again, thanks to, when I made that commentary earlier, that we have come out of nascency, there are also guidelines around it, right? So you know what kind of data you can take, what kind of declaration you need to do, and how you need to be custodian of the data. And it's not just left to the consumer. The regulators have stepped in and the regulators have given appropriate guidelines around it. So now when the trust aspect is taken care of, when it comes to the data part of it, that's where the opportunity of actually using machine learning as a model. Tons of models, thanks to the computing power, thanks to the cost which has come down. Therefore, you're able to kind of build entire thesis around all this alternate data. And what could be an alternate data? It could be behavioral data. It could be even to the extent where we know some thesis which our model predicts that if you are talking to a self-employed person, let's say a micro business owner, when he or she is applying for a loan and then there is a pattern evolving around the credit behavior. When you're talking about salaried person, then there is a pattern which is evolving based on the occupation and the vulnerability of the occupation. Maybe there is a sectorial angle also which is coming in. Yeah. So all that prediction humanly is not possible. You can think intuitively, but you cannot do it without computing power and without the machine learning languages. One evolution which has also happened is previously what was happening based on the business you are in, whether it's payments or lending, you had one verticalized area to focus. That means lending, you're focused on underwriting. If it's wealth tech, you're focused on recommendation. But now it's across the value chain which we are able to do it. That means there is an ML aspect which is coming into collections also. That how smart collections can happen. There is an ML angle, and especially Gen AI angle coming to the sourcing part of it. How you can actually have very customized creatives, campaigns running for sourcing your customers, for your retention efforts. Today, a campaign can actually talk to you, the point which Sugandh was mentioning, right? Customization at scale, we call it Uberization. So you can actually have a campaign on your phone actually talking to you with your name or with your relative's name to that extent. And the kind of attachment it creates is very different. How is it possible? Again, use cases of Gen AI. So if you see net basis, the entire value chain is getting benefited and disrupted thanks to AI, Gen AI, ML. But at the same time, there is no FOMO around it.
I think, one of the interesting thing while Souparno you were talking, Sugandh was also alluding to it, is saying it's kind of already there, pervasive, integrated, and we perhaps are sometimes recognizing it when that is a very carved out initiative called AI, but otherwise it's already in our life one way or other. And the positive impact of that is being seen by fintechs as well as by customers. Now, Seema, my question to you is, the traditional way of consuming finance in the livelihood segment and the so-called margin segment that we are today trying to address, it is very physical. It had a lot of component that was manual, that had records, that had to and fro logistics involved. From there to today, everything completely digital is no longer a dream. It is already happening everywhere, right? Now, how fast and how soon and how efficiently can we get millions over the other side of the line to come across to this side of the line? And while we do this, we also need to do this in a very risk managed manner. Because Sugandh just touched upon that fact, saying that there is a lot of, all of us know the kind of frauds and the kind of deep fake and that's a vulnerable section. It's quite possible for them to kind of tip off, right? And so the responsible AI is something Souparno also touched upon. So how do we do this? What needs to be done so that this can be done faster and in a safer way? Yeah.
Okay, so you said a lot of things here, and if I just break it down, if I answer the last one first, which is about how do you make it safe. So a part of our digital literacy, digital financial literacy program is also to build trust and confidence. And one of the very strong element of passing that down, the line is to give them training on security and cybersecurity. So when you teach these rural women how to really put all their savings and transactions digitally, then of course very strong element is building their confidence to ensuring that these are safe platforms. So that is a very strong element of our curriculum. So cybersecurity, data security is something that we build their awareness and interest in, and that's how we gain trust that they can use digital cashless payment, because we are so used to seeing money and touching it, right? I didn't feel very comfortable. I mean, I'm talking about women who traditionally save money, in a piggy bank or something like that. So the other element of it that you said is how fast. Well, how fast we can do this is how much support we get. We are non-for-profit and we work with companies and CSR leaders who believe in the work that we are doing. So when you say how much is the appetite, we have tremendous appetite in a country like India. The digital divide, I'm not even talking about the urban areas, because in urban areas you quickly pick up things. I'm talking about women who don't even own a phone. And if there is one phone in the family, a smartphone, they don't have access to it. And in other statistics will tell you that only 25% of the rural women in India have access to internet. So these are the numbers we are talking about. We are not talking about the fanciest phone here. We are talking about even accessibility from that point of view. Then we are talking about gender-specific barriers. What are those gender-specific barriers? They are not only to education and accessibility, it is also how limited their mobility is, how much time constraints they have, because they have such a caregiving role, and how accessible are they, because they don't even have a credit history. So, how accessible are they to these loans? And here, this gentleman before me, Mr. Anil Gupta, said something very right. He said that, we know in India, the Panchayati Raj system, women have a quota, they get elected, but their men rule. It's true, it's nothing new, we've known this. So, and the other thing he said that, if there are any women entrepreneurs, they're running their businesses informally. There's nothing more true than that. So where we come in and make a difference is says, yes, what we are doing in our work is transforming that informality to formal. Because part of our work is to get them registered in UAMs, get them registered in URs, so they become part of, a formal part of MSMEs. That's a big step. That's the first step. Then what else do? We tackle the gender element of inclusion in fintech from the point of view that after going through our training program, we have a 95% success rate of where women do not even have access to a mobile phone. 95% of the women are actually, doing their, cashless deposits. They're checking on their balance and savings. That's a big number. We have a success rate of 95% adoption. So how fast? I would say that, the appetite, the interest, and the ability exists. How much room we can cover, how far we can penetrate, and how fast really depends on how much interest, the government is already there. We really want to know how many private sector companies are willing to put their efforts behind that, because you spoke about consumer behavior. So consumerism works both ways, right? You have to enable people. You have to, really create that ability, the money power, the ability to spend. And I don't think there's a dearth of consumerism in India, because if there's one economy in the world, like you said rightly, the demand is already there. And I think the efforts are accelerated. So when I talk about numbers, because you're all financial experts here, let me tell you that we are already working with nearly 150,000 women entrepreneurs in the rural areas. And when we talk about aspirational block districts, we have already confirmed reaching out to 100,000 already as we speak. And we have been into this program for less than a year. So I think that's pretty fast, but we can even move faster.
Yeah, I think that's quite fast. And there are, like Nasscom Foundation, there are many other foundations, there are many institutions that are on this path. Something you said, Jyoti, is about the innovation and the effort and investment that goes in innovation in helping the cause. I have been privy to some of the efforts that have been put in by fintechs to help build most of the digital solutions and offerings on feature phones, because of the fact that most of the rural India has only feature phones as a reality. So when you think of it, in a panel discussion like this, one can argue saying that it's a bit of backward sort of innovation, but that's what the customer wants. That's what will help the customer to adapt, and so if that's what it takes. That appetite and that outlook, that vision, and that willingness to put money behind it, effort money behind it, is hats off. Like, that's very commendable by the fintech participants of our economy. So on that note, we will slightly move towards regulation now. We have talked about the demand, consumer experience, affordability, how can we push the speed at which we adopt this, and how can this whole movement can be facilitated. And there's no guess in this thing, because it's a core heavily regulated. And we also differentiate between regulated and non-regulated in the market, and that there's a huge impact of regulation in how we operate and how fintechs operate and how the customer gets benefited. From your side, Sugandh, how do you see regulations today enabling this moment and adoption and improvement of marginalized section of people for inclusion? And also cover, please, how do you see this will change over the near future?
So I think overall, if you see what fintechs have been able to achieve is really the foundation work which was laid through DPIs. I think we can never forget this was public money put into creating that infrastructure which all of us use, and we built on that to provide financial services. So I think the public infrastructure itself was a very important part of the fintech evolution in last 10, 15 years. On the regulation side also, I think regulation has been extremely progressive in enabling that kind of environment where fintechs can operate. Beginning with digital KYC, right? Just to say that you can do it in this way was very important for us, for the fintechs to really go into the market. Providing, payment solutions, right? Saying that UPI framework, which was essentially about, financial inclusion. So from that perspective, regulation over a period of time has grown and evolved to say that, your fintechs can provide more and more. There is innovation happening. They can penetrate the services. But from a public policy perspective, it's also important that we look at the risk also. So I think while there are policies which look at that how do we enable fintechs to provide more and more services and do innovate and reach deeper and broader, it's equally important part to see that we have controls and safeguards in place which ensure that customer protection remains on the forefront. So what we saw 3 years back, right? So ultimately digital lending guidelines which came, this is just one example where regulators saw that, because there are no guidelines, people are operating in sort of gray. There are a lot of illegal players at that point which came into the fray. We had many bad examples of loan apps operating from different jurisdictions, which were just illegal. And for customer, nobody knows, right? Okay, who is legal, who is illegal. And therefore, regulator has to come in to say, okay, this is the ground rules of how the digital lending will happen. This is what you will tell to customer. This is the regulated player. What is their responsibility? What is the responsibility of non-regulated player or the fintechs in that case, which we call as LSP? What kind of data they can access, how they would underwrite, how they would provide information, and so on. So a lot of ground rules were set. So which essentially mean 3 years down the line, we are seeing a very, robust ecosystem. Just to give an example, when before regulation, if you look at Play Store, which is the primary source of loan apps or any apps in the system, for every 1 or 2 legit app, you will see another 8 apps which were illegal one, and they were just creating ruckus in the market by very abusive recovery practices. No, I mean, they were just fake apps and very boldly coming, advertising with downloads, millions of them. With regulation coming in, making it completely illegal to do it, and now we have something like Bula, which is banning of unregulated activity coming soon. We could really solve for that problem, and you no longer perhaps listen those stories in the newspaper. So this is how regulation has to do both roles, right? It has to ensure that innovation continue to happen, the authorized player continue to operate in a way which is very conducive for the businesses, but at the same time they also have to safeguards for the customer point of view, which they have done. So regulator has to have that balancing role. And your second point about how do we see that from an inclusion perspective, we see huge thrust, right? Every time, I think we have a fintech department in RBI which specifically looks at fintech ecosystem as a whole. And every meeting, they do this, session with fintech ecosystem every month, and they say, give a solution which can solve for the agriculture, which can solve for small and business, which can solve for women, which can solve for elderly. So, they challenge us all the time to say that, define solution. They do a lot of hackathon, and RBIH is there, which is RBI Innovation Hit, which is again talking a lot about, catering or nurturing the fintechs, which are, looking at problem statement, which perhaps is not commercially viable at this point, but solving for something. We recently saw a case where a fintech has innovated for blind people, right? It was a note, it was a very small device like a wallet, so which people can just keep, and it will tell them that, what kind of notes they have and what is the money they have. So they're always looking at these kind of solution. I think it's on us now as a community, because regulatory ecosystem is very positive, and so is from the government side. And I think being responsible and solving for the real issues will, there's no dearth or demand, as I said.
Yeah. No, I see that. I think we have a very innovative regulator leading the innovation from the front, and the government enabling. It's not a single regulatory sort of regime that we have. We have multi-dimensional regulations, and unlike many other developing economies, our ecosystem from a regulation standpoint is very, very proactive, and perhaps even leading from the front in many of these cases. And one of the things that you talked about, the DPI investments the government had done, and how those rails were opened for private players to innovate on top of it. That's like, many of my conversation with my overseas partners, even from US and other places, it comes across as a complete disruptive thinking for them, because they have seen the rise of the likes of PayPal's becoming multi-billion institutions, and they're saying if you all of a sudden kill the entire PayPal business model and make it open for everybody, how will the businesses prosper? But to their surprise, you see on UPI now we have many businesses being built on top of UPI. So that goes to say, if you facilitate the first steps of innovation from the government standpoint, of course, some of the basic rudimentary models might get killed, but you will get more innovative, more useful models built on top of that. Now, so from your standpoint as a player in the field, do you have any comments? And feel free to be open at your own risk.
The last disclaimer was...
So I just tried to put that disclaimers because I just said feel free to. So go. I mean, it's important to hear your views because Sugandh can be, representing face. So therefore, she can say what she said. Yeah. But you can be a little more...
No, absolutely. And Sugandh possibly will vouch that it has actually helped, to be honest. And the point which she was mentioning, right? See, let's face it, there was a trust deficit in the industry. And we had a long tail. And the point which Sugandh was mentioning, right? When you have a long tail, it becomes very, very difficult. So if you are a regulated entity, or even if you are a non-regulated responsible player, material player, you know that it is very, very important that deficit should not be there overall on the ecosystem, because it will not harm possibly the bad players and the long tail, it will harm you. Yeah. So from that aspect, the interventions in terms of the examples given, right, DLG, or now with the SRO being there, it's fantastic. Because again, even in forms of regulations, right, we have come from that curve of do's and don'ts to a stage where from here on, regulation has to be dialogue driven. And for a dialogue-driven regulation, you need an SRO, you need an intermediary layer where everything can be addressed appropriately, including addressing the elephant in the room. So that way it's been fantastic. I will also have to accept one thing, that even in the ecosystem, right, in the fintech ecosystem, there is a rewiring has happened in the minds of the leaders, in the minds of the founders, with all due respect to all other sectors. It is very clear, you would like to believe that fintech/financial services is different. It's not in high-tech economy, it's not like e-com economy, right? So there is a very different way to approach the problem statement. You're dealing with money, therefore most of the time it is a multivariate problem which you are trying to address. So regulation, from a stage where regulation was made as a commentary of being a speed bump, to that appreciation that, hey, you know what, regulation is your guardrails and not the speed bump. I think that mindset shift also has happened. Now from here on, what as players, the expectation is fantastic. We have SROs, we have the way to where we can actually have our placements, have an ongoing dialogue. But at the same time, the full potential of fintechs will only come through convergence.
Yeah.
We are not there, right? Just think of it, right? Convergence is not consolidation. We are not talking about very asset-light businesses of only discovery, or we are not talking about, let's say, the e-com business where duopoly is the final state, right? It will not be a consolidation scenario, but it will be for sure a convergence. Today, if the way the category is maturing, if someone has to go to app A for payments, app B for lending, and app C for wealth, it's a huge friction.
Yeah.
So you will see the convergence to happen for the interest of the consumer. Now again, for that to happen, then are we talking about a fintech dealing with RBI, multiple departments, SEBI, and then IRDA? I think that's where some level of support and framework needs to be there, where it becomes easy for the fintechs to come up with solutions, and also on an operating basis.
Yeah, being the customer at the center,
governance, and even on, Sugandh mentioned about innovation, right? Even you need sandboxes on business scale, not just only on technology scale. Today we are like keenly looking forward to KYC solution coming out of the sandbox, right? But still it's tech. But there are also business model queries and questions which will cut across all these regulators.
Right.
So that's where, as a player, that would be the prominent ask, that how we evolve at that level and at that level layer is going to be very, very important.
Right, right. I think the way the larger banking domain has evolved and shift towards potential open banking sort of a era that we would move into very soon. We are already seeing a lot of customer data at that layer convergence, right? Of course, there is regulatory considerations in terms of consent and then reuse of data and then recency and privacy, etc. But I think that progress is getting there in terms of that. But the point that you put forward is very relevant. In the middle and back office part of our engines, we will still have to deal with multiple set of regulations, and perhaps that will also see a convergence soon. So to Jyoti, the point is from a customer data privacy and protection standpoint in the vulnerable sections of society where there isn't enough awareness about data itself, and they perhaps one part of the literacy is apart from making them start using these apps, also educating them in terms of what is sensitive, what can be misused. And do you have any experience to share on that side?
I think the more detailed experience will be with the people who actually take this program down to the mile. But from what I understand from the top line point of view, in all the trainings that we do and the kind of touch points that we have programs that ensure that you maintain data privacy. They have a sense where they know that there is, there's cybersecurity and other aspects, and they are very well defined, aspects of the curriculum. More than that, I wouldn't be able to comment at this point, especially not trying to see where, how that can be driven about. But then, since we are emerging from Nasscom, so definitely technology is something that we are well attuned to. So even our curriculums and our programs are built in such a way that they tackle with these things.
Yeah. It's important at the same, when the tech and innovation and adoption happens, it's important to have that awareness and governance around their data and obviously the customer sense of, importance of data as well. On this note, before we can have a few more points discussed, we have about 8 minutes left in the panel. I would like to open up for the audience if any of you want to raise any questions. So we'll start from here and come to you, Para. Can someone give a mic to? Yeah, we can. I'll come and give you this mic.
You have already touched upon the scam, digital arrest, etc. Maybe if you can elaborate more on that. Other question is, don't you think that we make fintech as it should be a part of the educational curriculum so that everyone is trained from the day one? So that's a very important thing, because whatever we have learnt is through all these, through mobile phones only. But if we start teaching the kids right in the schools, it will be a great fintech economy for us. That's what I think each one of us is aspiring for.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, soon we are going to launch a program. This is precisely the point, because you cannot reach a scale unless this is something which is part of the national fabric in terms of education, right? So starting with, if not in early education, but from class 10 onwards, when you start talking about these concepts, not just fintech as such, but financial education, I would say, right? How to be disciplined with financial education, what kind of products are there, cyber security. So absolutely, I think this is something which we are working towards. Let's see how it goes, but it has to be everybody's agenda, right? As she was saying, government is there, but even as a private sector, we all have to commit to ensure that, in the schools, in the young people, right? For most of our customer base is very young, I guess data is roughly 25%, which means 1 in every 4 customer is less than 25-year-old. These are very young people, first time taking credit, first time dealing with insurance. And they would not have known about, what the credit is, how you can be over leveraged, you can make bad decisions, and so on. So, going to these, large pools of people, something which you will hear from us very soon, where we are trying to look at, these BPO kind of a places where large number of young people are, to ensure that they learn about these discipline. And of course, there is a instant learning which is anyway happening. Just because, first time you take credit, you learn a lot, right? So I think we should not take away that. That should happen. But on a larger level, it should be part of the curriculum. And on the scam, I guess everybody is aware there's so much scam happening all the time. I think for people like Souparno, I think this is one thing which they deal day in and out. Something which they have to ensure that they protect customers from that, right? Just to informing them, putting in place a lot of investment. If you see from the fintech side, goes when we talk about fraud prevention is the biggest piece in entire process, just to ensure that customer is not spoofed, and also their own impersonation, right? We have seen, there are fraudsters which are misusing the name of the very established brands. They go out to customer, right? Some maybe places where you work, people don't know who's actually Paytm or PhonePe. They may go some fake Paytm or something, right? Those things happen all the time. And again, it's a hard game to, hard problem to solve for, given how the technology is evolving, and similarly to what AI and other things are doing, it will become even harder battle for sure. But I think there is a much better preparedness, I would say. We work very closely with I4C, which is part of MHA, Indian Cybercrime Coordination Cell. They have integrated a lot of these functions to ensure that cybersecurity remains a top priority. You must be listening to all the educational material which is happening. So this is like a really war footing, right? Effort. We saw something like this at the time of COVID only.
Yeah.
So that shows how, effort. But as I said, it's very complicated and complex problem, and more efforts would be necessary.
Just one
It's
point I'd like to add. But go ahead.
It's like a guerrilla warfare. It's constant. You address something or the other happens. And it's not just from the consumer standpoint, like how a consumer can be, the fact of life is Jamtara also is in India. So it's not just the consumer how is targeted, even the brands, and therefore, the point which Sugandh mentioned, even us 1.5 years back, including another very prominent competitors. So there were some portals which were put across with the E missing and the A missing, and that was addressed. And for 72 hours, we were just scrambling. Right, so it's a real threat, but the appreciation is there. As I said, it's a constant guerrilla warfare. You cannot claim victory as we speak. So it's always there.
Because it evolves also very fast. See, one of the things is anything powerful will have two sides of it. You can use it for good and bad. And the bad actors are, unfortunately for us, in proportion in our society and across the world is there, right? And they seem to be more efficient because they have no regulations. They don't have to worry about anything. So that responsible part is missing out there. They can go to any extent. So you'll see those impacts at the early stages of any innovation a little more magnified than the good side of it. But as we come of age with regulations, being responsible actors in the economy, this actually takes care of itself. Just one dimension I want to add to your question. You said, should we integrate this into curriculum for youngsters? My take is the digital natives, they get it default. They don't get duped as much as the senior sections of the society. So perhaps the education need to start at that age, because the kids these days are quite well adept. They know what is hacked and what is not hacked, right? So Param, you had a question, please.
Yeah, so great comments on both innovation and keeping it literally from the grassroots level. So this one's actually to you, Souparno, because you made a good comment on the use of alternate data and how alternate data fueled by AI and ML can help inclusion. Is there a need to create a loop between what is some of that alternate data that can result in more people coming into inclusion and therefore making it maybe a little more formal rather than just back-end rules per se, right? So is there a need to kind of, get people more educated on if you have 1, 2, 3, and that's what will help you come into financial inclusion?
No, Fantastic question. And you know, it's already happening in the sense like even in the traditional binary space, if you look at it like the appreciation of what a good bureau score could be, or let's say for you to achieve or maintain a good bureau score, what needs to be there. So that democratization is happening fast. I'm not saying it's already there, it's also happening fast. The point which you otherwise mentioned, that you know, what are the alternates? Like those alternates, will it be always there, evident and prominent with the users? As of today, the answer is no. But there are certain aspects of the alternates also people have figured out. In the sense like they have also figured out that, hey, you know, if I do certain false declaration, there are ways now I'm getting caught. So which possibly was not the case. Is it like very evident? At times the answer is no, because we also would not want to make it evident for reasons. But things like, I'll give you examples. Let's say someone is a self-employed but claims to be a salaried person, because the thesis is like, oh, if I'm a salaried person, I'll get a loan, maybe easy. It's a little easy. So those aspects also are getting percolated, and people are possibly getting it a lot more intuitively and organically rather than through an educated way.
Right. We are on top of our time. I think it's been a very patient listening by all of you. It's not easy to sit through with four of us for an hour, looking so interested in the topic. So I must thank all of you first. It's been a great audience, and my co-panelists, all of you shared excellent insight. Thank you all. Have a great evening ahead.